Candace Newmaker's story. When Jean Newmaker adopted her 5-year-old daughter, Candace Newmaker, she knew it wasn't going to be easy, but she never expected it to be so hard. She had spent months trying to bond with the 7-year-old, but to no avail. Her daughter simply wasn't forming an attachment to her. Even worse, she wasn't displaying signs of attaching to anything else either. She showed almost no regard for her surroundings, or even other living things, reportedly playing with matches and killing her pet goldfish. For several years, Jean took Candace to multiple therapists who suggested and prescribed various medications. Despite the help, Jean still worried about Candace's behavior. Then, in early 2000, Jean heard of something she thought could finally help her. A therapist in Colorado, 1,000 miles from her North Carolina home, specialized in a form of reattachment therapy known as rebirthing, a treatment for reactive attachment disorder. The treatment, part of a 2-week intensive session, cost the single mother $7,000, but Jean agreed to it nonetheless, traveling across the country with her daughter for the help. The first week of the treatment went as planned, and Candace began to show improvement. Then, in week 2, disaster struck. Psychotherapist out of whose basement the therapy was being conducted decided that Candace Newmaker was ready for the rebirthing. During the rebirthing and in an attempt to simulate the birth canal, the patient is tightly wrapped in a sheet and laid under a pile of pillows, weighed down by the therapist. The patient must then wriggle out of the sheet and the pillows, thus being reborn into the arms of their loving parents. The rebirthing was videotaped so that Candace's mother could watch from another room, experiencing the miracle of her child's rebirth without getting in the way. In the end, the video would prove to be anything but miraculous and would become a key piece of evidence in convicting Connell Watkins and her assistants. At the beginning of the video, Watkins instructs the 10-year-old Candace to lie on the ground on top of a sheet and curl up in the fetal position. As the sheet is pulled tightly around her and tied at the top and bottom, she instructs Candace on what to do next. Imagine yourself as a teeny little baby inside your mother's womb and what it felt like, she says. Warm. It felt tight because her stomach was all around you. Then, 3 assistants gather around, each armed with a large pillow. Together, they are seen pressing the pillows down on Candace, as Watkins tells her to try and get out. Come out head first, Watkins' assistant instructs. You have to push really hard with your feet. If you stay in there, you're going to die and your mommy's going to die. It wasn't until 8 long minutes into her rebirthing that Candace first expressed her inability to get out of her makeshift womb. Who's sitting on me? She asked. I can't do it. I can't do it. Then she began to cry. At 10 minutes, she began to tell Watkins she couldn't breathe. Whoever is pushing on my head, it's not helping, she said. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't breathe. It's too dark under here. Please quit pushing on my head, I can't do it. Somebody's sitting on top of me. Candace Newmaker continued to struggle for an hour longer, telling them repeatedly that she couldn't breathe and expressing fears that she was going to die. At one point, Watkins' assistant told her that if that was what she wanted to do, she should do it. Go ahead and die right now, she said, after Candace asked if they wanted her to die. For real. For real. For just over 70 minutes, Candace Newmaker struggled as she was slowly smothered to death. She vomited and defecated inside the sheet and ultimately asphyxiated, likely a full 20 minutes before Watkins unwrapped her, as the last minutes of the video showed no sounds coming from her. As soon as she was unwrapped, her mother screamed and Watkins attempted CPR. There, the video ends. Candace Newmaker was later pronounced dead from asphyxiation at a local hospital. Connell Watkins and her assistant were charged with reckless child abuse resulting in death and sentenced to 16 years in prison. The other 2 people who had held the pillows in the video were given 10 years probation for criminally negligent child abuse and sentenced to serve 1,000 hours of community service as part of a plea bargain. As a result of Candace Newmaker's death, a law was instigated in Colorado and North Carolina that prohibited dangerous birth reenactments, and similar legislation was introduced in other states as well. Connell Watkins was paroled in 2008. The Ed Gein story. This is one of the most disturbing cases to happen in the world purely because of what he used his victims' body parts for. It all began on the May 16, 1944 in Plainfield, Wisconsin, when Ed's brother Henry Gein died in extremely mysterious circumstances during a fire close to the family farm. His body was found in a field supposedly by his brother, who alerted authorities and took them directly to Henry's body. Despite bruises being found on Henry's body and neck, his death was ruled an accident. Although it is unconfirmed, many believe Henry was Ed's first victim in his horrific killings. Following on from his brother's death, Ed's mother, who often preached to both her sons how all women except her were instruments of the devil, had a paralytic stroke and remained immobile for the rest of her life whilst Ed took care of her. Ed was naturally very lonely, often staying on the farm doing chores, and his mother's death following a second stroke in 1945 caused him to lose his only friend and one true love. This was crippling for Ed and could possibly be one of the reasons for his killing spree. Ed remained off the radar for many years, doing odd jobs in Plainfield and maintaining his family farm. This all ended in 1957 when a hardware shop owner by the name of Bernice Wardens disappeared. A nearby witness reported the hardware shop's truck driven out the back of the building in the early morning. When police searched the shop, bloodstains were found alongside an empty counter. Bernice Warden's son, Frank Wardens, also told police it was Edward Gein who was last seen in the shop. That same day, Gein was arrested in a grocery shop in West Plainfield, and police searched the family farm. What the police found shocked the whole of America. In Gein's shed was Warden's body, hung up by her leg with her hands tied, and described as dressed out like a deer if she had been shot by a rifle and multinational made after her death. Despite this shocking discovery by police, it wasn't until they searched the rest of the house the true scale of what had happened over the past 12 years was revealed. Here is a list from Wikipedia of what the police found. Whole human bones and fragments, a wastebasket made of human skin covering several chair seat skulls on his bedpost, female skulls, some with the tops sawn off, bowls made from human skulls, a corset made from a female torso, skin from shoulders to waist, leggings made from human leg, ski masks made from the skin of female heads, Mary Hogan's face mask, in a paper bag Mary Hogan's skull, in a box Bernice Warden's entire head, in a burlap sack Bernice Warden's heart, in a plastic bag in front of Gein's potbelly stove, 9 vulvae in a shoebox, a young girl's dress, and the vulvas of 2 females judged to have been about 15 years old, a belt made from female human nipples, 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, a lampshade made from the skin of a human face, fingernails from female fingers. When questioned, it was discovered Gein would dig up freshly dug graves for Middle Ages women and turn their body parts into a woman costume so he could dress up like his mother and literally be in her skin. Whilst it is not confirmed how many people Gein killed, many link him to unsolved cases around the area in this time frame. Whilst on trial, it was decided Gein was not guilty by reason of insanity. Edward Gein died on July 26, 1984 due to cancer complications in a Wisconsin prison. The death of Elisa Lam. Elisa Lam was last seen on January 31, 2013 in the lobby of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She was vacationing through the West Coast, documenting the trip on her blog and checking in with her parents every day. On January 31st, those calls stopped. Lam had vanished. Soon the police were involved and her parents arrived to help with the search. They had nothing. That February, LAPD released elevator surveillance footage of Lam before her disappearance. The footage shows Lam behaving strangely in the elevator, appearing to talk with invisible people, peering around the corner of the door, crouching in the corner, and opening and closing the door. But what exactly is going on in this video raises more questions than answers. Theories range from psychotic episodes to demonic possession to unknown assailants just out of the camera's view. Around that time, hotel guests started reported weird things happening with the Cecil Hotel water supply. As CNN reports, the shower was awful, said Sabina Barr, who spent 8 days there during the investigation. When you turned the tap on, the water was coming black first for 2 seconds, and then it was going back to normal. The tap water tasted horrible, Barr said. It had a very funny, sweety, disgusting taste. It's a very strange taste. I can barely describe it. But for a week, they never complained. We never thought anything of it, she said. We thought it was just the way it was here. On the morning of February 19th, a hotel employee climbed to the roof and used a ladder to investigate the hotel's water storage tanks. That's where authorities found the decomposing, naked body of Lam, whose personal items were found nearby. After an autopsy, her death was labeled accidental. NBC Los Angeles reported at the time about the strange circumstances in the hotel's past. The tank has a metal latch that can be opened, but authorities said access to the roof is secured with an alarm and lock. The single-room occupancy hotel has an unusual history. Night stalker Richard Ramirez, who was found guilty of 14 slayings in the 1980s, lived on the 14th floor for several months in 1985. And international serial killer Jack Unterweger is suspected of murdering 3 prostitutes during the time he lived there in 1991. He killed himself in jail in 1994. In 1962, a female occupant jumped out of one of the hotel's windows, killing herself and a pedestrian on whom she landed. In February 2021, a Netflix doc called Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel explored Elisa's tragic case and the history of the cursed Cecil Hotel.